Okay, that's the very first slide. It should be a meadow.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
You just get right down there, or you can click anywhere on the screen.
Okay, I'll
Now
use
move
this
right
little
along
projector. Okay,
to the
well,
top.
let's move to the second slide. And, you know, because we're delayed, I'm going to have to really, what, Daniel?
Your camera's down there. So
I
if you
know.
wanna
Well,
look
they don't need to see me. I want them to see the slide.
Okay.
You don't need to see me. Well, one thing I would like to say is I'm very, very grateful that you invited me, because one of our basic mission is to inspire, create, and support communities and individuals to restore and connect habitat for native pollinators and wildlife. That's what our goal is. And I used to be a one-woman show, and now I've got about 3 board of directors and about 3 or 4 volunteers. So we're growing, and we actually have 7 projects basically in East Lyme, but our biggest project is we're putting in a 1-acre meadow at York Prison. And that's going to be an exciting project. We partnered with DEEP and a wildlife biologist. So why did we do this? We're doing this because, if any of you are entomologists out there, it is the little things that run the world. Insects give us a life today that is sustainable and healthy. They provide a food source. There's 3 different kinds of insects. They provide a food source for many people, but under that grouping, there's 3 different kinds of insects. There's pollinators, there's predators, and there's decomposers. When you think about it, just in a rough outline sketch, all the dead things in the world get decomposed, mainly by insects. The predators and the parasitoids are the wasp family, and they control a lot of our agricultural pests. A good example is the tomato hornworm. My group is basically focused on the pollinators. And just a quick review, pollination is when insects inadvertently, not on purpose, take pollen from one plant and distribute it to another plant. And that's called pollination, which results in fruits and food. The next slide, I'm going to run through these fast so we're not late. These are some of the basic things that run the world. And our culture, and I say our culture because I am an American and I've spent most of my time here, we kind of look at insects as unwanted things. And I used to think that way too. But since in the last 20 years, since I've becoming more aware and I further my education, I don't squash spiders anymore. I take them out with a napkin. I don't kill ants. Ants, I found out, pollinate our woodlands. They are 40% of our woodland annuals and perennials are pollinated by ants. So in this slide, we're looking at insects. In this slide, these are the pollinators that Pollinator Pathway East Lyme is focused on saving. We want to create and restore habitat for them. These are the creatures that go from flower to flower to produce fruit and vegetables. Grain, a lot of grains are pollinated by wind on the bottom of the slide. And sometimes people pollinate. Right now in China, there's people pollinating because they don't have insects to pollinate. So the scientists all agree that we totally survive on this planet because the bees and pollinators pollinate 1/3 of the food we eat. They say 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat on a daily basis comes from a native pollinator. The honeybee from Europe, predominantly Italy and France, they help tremendously, but the native pollinators are much more efficient at pollinating, and the flowers and fruits that are pollinated by native insects do it more efficiently. I wanted to include this slide because this flower fly or a hoverfly is the second best pollinator after our native bees here in the Northeast. And it looks kind of like a wasp, but it's really a fly. It could also be a bee, but insects are very clever. This insect has used this design for mimicry so that predators like a praying mantis or a bird or another insect won't eat it because they'll think it's a dangerous wasp because they've learned that. This is the most common this is the most common bumblebee you will see. It's the Bombus impatiens. And notice this red pollen basket here. This is a female, and when she goes out, she is loading that corbicula, which is an area on her hind leg that's indented with hairs. And she fills that with the pollen that she's getting from these flowers. She'll go back to the hive and she'll line these little cellular tubes with this pollen so that new eggs that are hatching will be fed. So here in New England, these are the most common pollinators that you'll see. The middle one is the carpenter bee, which a lot of people are fearful of. They don't like the carpenter bee. The female tends to tunnel in wood. She does not know that your deck is dead wood that you don't want tunneled in. She just tunnels in dead wood to lay her eggs. I did a study, and the home insurance industry says that their claims for female carpenter bee damage in, say, decks or railings is not strategically devastating. It doesn't do that much damage. I don't know the price on claims, but they don't consider the carpenter bee a threat to a home structure. But some people still kill them. I point this out so you won't be afraid of her. She really just wants to lay her eggs and go away. So in Connecticut, this is just a rough outline of what we could see in an average summer. And these 2,000 species of aphids, those are baby bird food. Baby birds do not eat.
So do most bees not have stingers?
Well, no, native bees do have stingers, but they don't really want to sting you. They're really pretty docile. When I'm out working in our fields and our meadows, I let them crawl on me. They're like butterflies too. They'll come and they'll just use their tongues to take the salt and minerals off of your body. A honeybee, on the other hand, will sting you. They are a different beast, not like the native bees. Honeybees tend to be aggressive. Now, a hornet or a paper wasp, they will sting you more aggressively because they're protecting their home. I've been stung by paper wasps, but I've learned over the years when I'm outside gardening, I simply stand still when I see that I've disturbed a nest, and the guard wasp will come out and fly around me just to check out if I'm a threat. And if I stand perfectly still and kind of not try to get excited, because they can smell adrenaline and they can smell chemicals off you. If I just stay calm, it flies away and I can go about my gardening. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking me questions. You can do that. I remember as a child, we had lots of insects on our screen, on our windshield when we went for road trips. And since I've become an adult and I take road trips, I don't see many insects. So there's definitely a decline. We're seeing a decline in our insects. We have a very educated, prominent professor and entomologist up at UConn, Dr. David Wagner. And I like to use his quote in my presentations because he has spent a life studying soft-bodied insects like caterpillars. He's written books on soft-bodied caterpillars. And he was quoted as saying that, losing 30% of our insects in a 30-year span, that's going to add up. So my nonprofit wants to educate people so we can try to train the way we've been thinking about how we manage our yards and our property. These are the biggest threats to our pollinators, insects in general, but like I said before, Pollinator Pathway is basically concerned about pollinators. Our habitat, our human habitat has defragmented greatly insect homes, food, foraging, and reproduction. This housing development up at the top, I bet a lot of those are not native plants. Most likely, they're probably plants from big box stores that nurseries buy. This phenomena came about after World War II. And that's fine, but if we can develop habitats for people, housing developments that incorporate native plants, doesn't need a lot of grass. We actually, grass is not beneficial for insects at all, and it uses a lot of unnecessary resources. But if we could develop housing areas like this that could incorporate native plants, that would be good, because we're taking away their food and their reproduction sites. The other thing that's a great threat is our pesticide use. Weed and feed, any Scott's product, these are chemical formulated. There are statistics that say that a lot of this is not even absorbed into the ground, and it goes into our watersheds and our aquifers. So maybe we should think twice about using these products. When we spray for insects, we're killing indiscriminately the things that we need for our standard of living today. When I do presentations for grade schools, I always ask the children to go out and see if they can find anything living in a lawn. Measure off with a rope and 4 sticks, maybe a 6-foot area, and look at it every day, and tell the teacher after a week of looking if you see anything living in that lawn, and there's nothing that lives in it. An ant may crawl by, a stink bug may crawl through, but there's nothing that's sustained on a lawn. My nonprofit asks people to question their lawn. I have a lawn. I've divided it up with gardens and walkways in different areas, but this size of a lawn and your average lawn, it takes up a lot of resources that could be spent preserving the standard of living that we're used to. This slide is kind of daunting, but the facts are absolutely true. This is the amount of chemicals and toxic carcinogens that we use, also gasoline, and we pollute the air, and all the water that we use for a lawn. Not saying lawns are bad, but can we reduce them? The land survey from Yukon just put out their statistics in 2022 that in Connecticut alone, agricultural cover crop is no longer the predominant cover crop. It is now lawns. Lawns are the predominant cover crop in Connecticut. Farmers are selling their land and developers are building houses with lots of lawns. We suggest that instead of pesticides and lawn chemicals, you do these easy strategies. And if you're outside entertaining, put in a fan. First of all, I should say that in North America, 70% of our native bees live underground. Most of them live in old rodent tunnels. They take advantage of old rodent tunnels. They'll also take advantage of tree stumps and rotting wood. And in this picture right here, the second one down on the left, a female bee will tunnel about 2 or 3 inches down. And over here, you'll see it go straight down, and then she'll go off and make these waterproof tunnels. So when we use pesticides, we're killing everything in the soil. So if we continue with the cultural norms that our culture has been practicing with large lawns, and to keep that lawn alive, we have to use chemicals, and to keep that lawn alive, we have to use Grub-X because we don't want grubs and we don't want skunks and moles tunneling in to eat the grubs because they're meat eaters. So the list just goes on and on. If we continue at that rate and we lose our pollinators, these things would definitely happen. Flowering plants would go extinct, and that would change the physical structure of all the terrestrial habitats, which would cause the collapse of the food chain. All of these things that we eat would be gone because most of these in this picture, particularly the tomatoes, and the pumpkins and the squash, are best pollinated by the larger bees. The carpenter bee, for example, that's one of our larger native bees. To pollinate tomatoes, pumpkins, squash, and any of the cucurbit family, they unhinge their wings off their shoulder muscles, and they vibrate in a process called sonication. And they vibrate so rapidly and so intensely that the pollen actually drops off. Say I'm pointing to this squash flower. It drops off of that flower onto the hairy body of the bee, which then the bee goes off to another squash flower, and thus pollination occurs. The carpenter bee doesn't know that it's doing that. It just goes in there for pollen and some nectar. So why do we have to have native plants? We have to have native plants to support these insects. I talk about caterpillars. Those are the soft-bodied insects that are the basis of the food chain. And this is an example by Doug Ptolemy, who is an entomologist at the University of Delaware. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. His graduate students did a study on native plants versus non-native. And here's an excellent example. A native white oak and a black cherry that have co-evolved with our insects, all of these insects, particularly the pollinators, for over 100 million years. Look at all the soft-bodied insects they bring in. Whereas a burning bush that comes from Asia and a calorie pear that comes from Europe, they hardly support any of our Northeast insects. Here's the food chain. This tells it all. All those soft-bodied insects eat all the things down here in the tertiary 1 group. They're the producers. And then the primary consumers are on the 2nd level. And as you can see, this chart over here shows the biomass. Caterpillars get their energy from photosynthesis from the sun. They eat the native plant leaves and they transfer all that energy up this food chain. It's absolutely, what an amazing system we have. And all of these things eat the other things. And then of course, we're at the top. So if we lose all these 1st level tertiary producers, the soft-bodied insects, the food chain eventually will collapse.
I was going to say, I had read somewhere that the biomass of the insect world equals or surpasses the entire biomass of every other animal. Is that true?
That is very true. It is an awesome system. It's just amazing how our planet survives. Thank you for pointing that out. You're a smart viewer. You can ask as many questions as you want. I want you to challenge me. This is just another chart that I like to show because this is our lawn grass. That's not going to hold back any pollutants that are running through your yard if you have an aquifer nearby. But these plants, prairie dock, we plant that in our meadows. Butterfly weed, that's one of the essential that's the host plant. That's the larval plant for all monarchs, the Asclepias. And big blue stem and little blue stem, those are native grasses here to Connecticut and New England for 100 million years. Queen gines, queen butterflies, the last of its type that survive the summer, they burrow in under blue stem grass and overwinter. And then in the spring, they come out. Why they do blue stem grass, we don't know. There's a lot of things we still don't know. And I'm continually getting educated because this just fascinates me. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. We know that native plants are beneficial. So we know as humans, we're dependent on all these systems. The ecosystem services from native plants gives us all these advantages. And the ecosystem services from the insects do all of these things. So this system and this system is dependent upon each other. It's a system that we really have to stop messing with. So yes, all of these institutions have come on board in the last 10 to 15 years, not much longer. The US Fish and Wildlife, they came in first, and the Xerces Society, is that listed here? No, but yes, there it is. The Xerces Society, that was probably the first. Then the US Fish and Wildlife. The Smithsonian has done a lot of funding for pollinator preservation. I think they've just hired Professor David Wagner from UConn. He's doing studies on how to preserve, what we can do to preserve pollinators. This author, Doug Ptolemy, he's the professor of entomology down at University of Delaware. He's the man that changed my life. I've been a gardener since I've been a little girl, but 30 years ago, my backyard looked totally different. I didn't have a eaten leaf, or I didn't have any black spot on my hybrid teas, and I used chemicals galore until I read Doug Ptolemy. And I was floored that I was such a poor steward of the earth. I was ashamed of myself, to be honest with you. And I changed my habits totally. I am totally organic and I let nature live. But if you want to read more about our work, Doug Ptolemy has written 3 very good books. So I'm going to try to speed this up so we don't take too much time, but what can you do? These are things we kind of already talked about. Rethink your lawn, plant native, and avoid pesticides. And you want the things in your yard to be eaten. That's what they're there for. If you don't have chewed leaves on your viburnum or your blueberry bush or your native dogwood tree or your pussy willow, your Silex discolor, then your yard is not alive. It's not an ecosystem that's contributing. But where do you start? Okay, it can be daunting, but it's really easy to change this lawn into a diverse ecosystem that you're partnering with nature with. There's another book by Owen Wormser. He's a fellow that's been doing lawns into native plantings for about 30 years up in the Northeast, north of us. His book is called Lawns to Meadows. It's a nice little paperback, and he explains it very easily, ways you can remove your lawn, and just establish these simple, doesn't have to be a fancy design. You can start out with perennials, and you can do it around the tree. You could make a border to have some privacy. You could do something over here and put like an arbor, even if you wanted to get architecturally a little more interesting. You can also add things to your lawn. Lawn is a monoculture. Like I said, it doesn't support anything, but you can add wild violet, clover, wild strawberry. I have seen parts, we maintain a garden at the community center. They call it the library garden, but really it's in front of the community building. I noticed today, after leaving it alone for about 4 years, we have wild strawberry coming up in the grass there. A bird probably deposited the seed, and now we've got some native wild strawberry coming up in the lawn. The reason we want to do this again is to preserve the biodiversity, that system that nature has had of having ecosystems connect with the insects and the native plants. Here's a good example of this doesn't support anything. These are probably boxwoods from Asia. I'm not sure what these are. That's a red maple from Asia. I used to have a very big collection of these in my backyard. Some were like 20 feet tall. They've all been chainsawed down, and I'm planting native trees instead. That could be either a arborvitae or a Chamaecyparis, but we do have native Thuga arborvitae here, but that doesn't look like one. But this yard, some people say native plantings don't look formal. Well, you can have native plantings, and this is a mixture of native and non-native. We've got native, this looks like some native salvia or veronica. This looks like a native geranium. That could be native. I just see, doesn't have to be messy. It can look very formal. Portland, Maine, I incorporated these slides because Portland, Maine, downtown Portland, Maine has been absolutely amazing. They have changed areas from this to this. And here's a shopping center. Just a few examples of what can be done. Not anything hard, just have to remove the grass. We follow PPEL, Pollinator Pathway East Lyme, follows Doug Ptolemy's suggestions a lot of the time. 70% of our plantings in our yard, however big or small, should be at least native. These are two sections of my backyard, and I don't have all native. This tall orange over here and over here, that's a Mexican sunflower, which monarchs love. But these tall blue and the short blue over here, that's great blue lobelia, and I just let it seed itself. It's a native. Way in the back, I have some iris, that's not native. And I also have a lot of annuals in these pots. There are lists of annuals that we can provide you that pollinators and hummingbirds will enjoy for the summer. This is a native tree, and behind it, that's another native tree. And down in here, I have a mix of native shrubs, but I also have some daylilies, and I like this Asian grass. And I haven't ripped it out yet, but it's nice to have a diversity. These are some examples of some shrubs, all native shrubs, very easy to grow. They're not fussy. Just plant them in sun or shade to their preference, and they'll take off. I don't think I'm going to go through many of these slides. This is what we're doing, and I don't know if it would be to much interest of you. Oh, here's something that might interest you, though. One of our tasks is to remove invasive plant species. Just in East Lyme alone, these are the invasive plants, some of them quite harmful to the environment. Japanese honeysuckle, Oriental bittersweet has actually killed a 30-foot red maple on the town property where the new police station is. It's so big and so overgrown, we can't get at it, even with a small electric chainsaw. The tree is pretty much gone. Japanese barberry is loaded at our schools. It was very popular about 30 years ago. Everyone planted it because it has this beautiful burgundy foliage. Well, the Yukon Developmental Experiment Station down in Hamden released a few years ago, the Japanese barberry plant creates a microclimate underneath its very dense foliage. I have a picture here of its leaf and branch, but it's a very dense plant. It kind of looks like a big mushroom sitting right on the ground. Underneath that plant in the winter time, it creates a warm microclimate for any kind of small rodents. And then in the summertime, they concluded that it creates a cool atmosphere, a cool microclimate. And they also discovered that the things that live under barberry are predominantly the white-footed mouse, which they have concluded carries most of the ticks that we have. It's not the deer. The white-footed mouse is the predominant vector of ticks. So I think we should be removing those from our schoolyards, definitely. Autumn olive is a beautiful plant. It has silver underneath, a silver fuzzy addendum under that leaf. It's so invasive. Part of the problem with these invasive plant species is that they, like the Japanese barberry, the roots create a poison. It sends out a chemical poison from its root system that kills everything in its area that's not a Japanese barberry. Autumn olive just takes over. It's so tall, it spreads by suckering, and it seeds itself readily, just like the Callery pear. In Minnesota, a few years ago, I don't know the exact year, but Minnesota is paying people to remove their Callery pear. They're paying for them to have it chainsawed down. It's so invasive. Any questions on invasives that you have seen in your yard? Nope.
Marjorie, I have a question. Pachysandra and creeping myrtle, they're also invasive, aren't they?
They are. And you know, they're both, well, Vinca, I think, is from Europe, but Pachysandra is definitely an Asian. There is a native Pachysandra and it looks similar, but it's hard to get that native one, whereas the big box stores sell you the Asian varieties. You know, they are invasive. They don't have any chemicals that are emitted from the roots, and they do stabilize the soil, especially on a hillside. So, you know, it's hard for me to tell people, you know, I have this slope and it's really hard and it's stabilized by this invasive. You know, if you want to rip it out, we'd encourage you and we'd give you opportunities and options to buy something different. But sometimes these invasive plants are doing a good job, and it's hard to convince people to get rid of them, Judy.
Yeah, I get it.
I have a question about the butterfly bush. I'm
Yes.
very surprised to see that on the list. I have two of them in two small pollinator gardens that I have behind my house. And every summer they are highly populated with both butterflies and different kinds of bees. And they are particularly attractive to the monarch butterflies. And I don't understand why you consider that an invasive plant species, even if it's not native.
Deborah, I'm grateful that you asked me that. Butterfly bush, Buddleia davidi, is very attractive to butterflies and bees. It's so attractive that botanists have discovered that butterflies will spend all day on the butterfly bush getting the nectar. It has very, very sweet nectar. The nectar has been compared to, say, junk food that a teenager might like say you want to feed your 15-year-old Twinkies all day long, and then you expect that teenager to get their homework done and get to bed early and have a productive next day. The monarch or other butterflies that feed on the butterfly bush, the Buddleia davidi, react the same way. In controlled studies, they observed monarchs being so exhausted from feeding on the butterfly bush,
Oh my goodness.
they're too tired to do anything else, and they just die, they collapse. It's almost like too much junk food. The other thing there are two other things that are wrong with this bush. The second one is it's highly invasive. We don't see it much here in the Northeast, but below Maryland and southward, this plant takes hold readily. The birds eat the berries in the fall and they spread it. Now, I didn't believe this, and I'm honestly telling you this, until last year. Well, first of all, let me back up. It's 2003. I removed all my butterfly bushes in 2013. So there were no butterfly bushes on my acre property at all. Last year in our vegetable garden, guess what came up out of the blue? A butterfly bush. I couldn't believe it. I let it start to bloom and then I got ripped out. The other thing that's harmful about this plant, the third vital reason I think, and PPL, my board agrees with me, is that because the butterflies spend so much time on this bush, it doesn't provide anything else for it. Whereas if you planted butterfly weed or common milkweed or swamp milkweed, they would spend all day on those three native bushes. Plus, they'd be able to lay, the female monarchs, that is, would be able to lay their eggs on the leaves and reproduce. So this plant is invasive. It provides poor nectar, and it doesn't give insects anything else.
And
What
also,
about Rose of Sharon? I have Rose of Sharon, which seems to attract,
Rose of Sharon is kind of like the butterfly bush. It can be very invasive. There are some Rose of Sharons that are native. We'd have to check the second Latin name to make sure. Same thing, and they're commonly available. You can go to any store, even a specialty nursery still sells these plants, even though statistically we know that they're harmful for the environment. Like the calorie pear, the East Lyme Community Center has planted the parking lot with calorie pear. I'm in the process of trying to convince the town to chainsaw them down. They're so invasive, but they were popular 20, 30 years ago, and they're still legally for sale in the state of Connecticut. In Mass, I don't know of any state that has banned, I should say, butterfly bush. There could be one down south, but so far up in the Northeast, they haven't. Massachusetts has been stricter than Connecticut. We don't have any banned invasives yet, but the Connecticut Invasive Working Group is working on it. There are things like burning bush should not be allowed to be sold. That's very invasive too. Have I answered your question, Deborah?
yes, I'm not happy with the answer, but I guess it's a shock to me to learn that my butterfly bush, which is so popular, is not really popular for the right reason.
Yeah, it's been a cultural norm, and we're understanding now through science that some of these cultural norms that we've had have not been good norms.
and also, I just make a comment. I would also imagine that with butterflies spending so much time at the butterfly bush, they're not being the pollinators that they would otherwise be with other plants.
Good point, Bruce. Yes, exactly. They spend all day on that and they're not doing anything else, and they get so exhausted. The scientists, one scientist I read, it was quote unquote, the butterflies become addicted, which seemed bizarre, but those were the words he used. If you want to keep your butterfly bush, plant lots of milkweed. That would be my suggestion. Get a hold of the 3 Asclepias milkweed, the tuberosa, the incarnata, and the syriaca. Those are the 3 predominant milkweeds here in the Northeast.
I know I have at least one kind of milkweed, but I don't know what kind.
Okay, if it's the broad, big, round leaf, that's common milkweed. That's called syriaca. The slender leaf that has a pinkish or whitish, there's a cultivar called ice ballet that's white. Scientists have approved that for nectar and larval host. But the incarnata straight species is a pink, but the leaves are very slender and ovate with a point at the end. And the tuberosa, there's no doubt about that. That's a low growing, very slender leaf milkweed, and it blooms a bright orangey yellow, only about 18 inches tall. That's the lowest growing milkweed. The others can reach 30, 36 inches. Does that help you, Deborah?
Yeah, I think I have the tuberosa.
Okay, good. That's the bright orange one.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, butterflies will lay, the female monarch, I should say, will lay eggs on that. Yep. Well, that's good. So one of the, if anything, if I can leave you with anything here today, it would be to reduce your lawn or let your lawn go tall and crazy. and with polyculture plants. But the other thing would be to not clean up your yard in fall. The next slide, yes, this next slide. I mean, when you look at these butterflies that have these chrysalises, and these chrysalis, the Prometheus silkworm, the black swallowtail, and the Gulf fritillary, they overwinter in these shapes that look like crushed up leaves. And when you rake up your leaves, or have, and worse still, if you have those, I almost got divorced because my husband likes his leaf blower, and he's finally calmed down. He doesn't use it anymore. I've threatened him with tofu, but we don't kill the butterfly eggs. The little tiny butterfly egg that lays on a leaf is like, oh, it's a tiny little dot. It's like smaller than a pencil eraser, but like divide that by 8 times. And those eggs will not withstand 200-mile-an-hour leaf blowers. It'll just kill that. It'll just blow that egg right off these leaves. But these butterflies actually have a pupa inside these structures that look like a crushed up leaf. And then we rake them up or leaf blow them and put them in these bags, and they get hauled off to the landfill, which is great for decomposition and compost in the next year. But we're destroying the things. I guess what we want to say is we're destroying the things that make our lives what they are today. And if we appreciate our lives, we have to think of things from the insect's point of view. And the other thing, leaving some of these in your backyard if possible. Like I said, 70% of our native bumblebees and bees here in the Northeast live underground. The females that survive the last part of the summer season, they will nest under the blue stem. They'll also nest under brush piles, in rocks, in leaf matter. The mourning cloak butterfly does not overwinter in a chrysalis like in the previous page. The mourning cloak overwinters as a live butterfly. It wraps its body up as tight as it can be, almost like you'd imagine like a vampire, and it creeps into tree bark crevices or extensive leaf piles, really thick leaf matter. And that's how it survives the winter. So if you see a mourning cloak in the next month, that mourning cloak has survived a winter, a brutal New England winter. It's just amazing. This slide up here could be a hydrangea or a perennial, say Joe Pye weed, or your purple coneflower, echinacea. These plants have pithy stems that Tufts University has just put out information for us that we should cut these down to about 18 inches and no less, because bees over the springtime into the summer will continually lay eggs down, and those bees will hatch at the appropriate time. The bees have little walls that they make in between the eggs, and then they put that bread pollen basket I showed you before. That's what the eggs eat when they wake up.
Marjorie, I think Carla has a question. Carla, are you there?
Yes, she is. She's here.
Hi.
Hi, Dan.
Hi there. I have a question, a comment. First of all, I think that was an absolutely fabulously informative talk. Who the heck knew that our pretty red maple is sort of useless to the ecosystem? We didn't know. You know, but I can tell you, any future trees we plant, we will seek consultation from you. I have a question about what we do with our leaves. So the back part of our yard, or more than the back part of our yard, is natural. It's trees and fallen trees. And that's where the people who rake our leaves put the leaves back there. Is that all right in terms of critters using the leaves to lay eggs or to hide in or overwinter in?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, I think it is okay. If they do it gently, I think it would be fine. Those leaf blowers, I wish we could ban them, but the industry has a powerful lobby, and there's so many people that make a living doing that work. You don't have to be educated to be a leaf blower. And a lot of these people are transient. So, I don't want to deny them work and a living, but their job is just so harmful. I think raking them gently is fine. And I applaud you for doing that. I applaud you for having the mindset to be a good land steward. That really means a lot to PPEL. People like you, we will change the cultural norm eventually if we keep educating people and spreading the word. Even your example in your neighborhood, people might ask you, why are you doing that? And you can tell them, and then they'll be educated. A little girl in the Flanders kindergarten came up to me after a presentation. She said, my dad has lawn chemicals come to take care of our lawn. Do you think, we were talking about fireflies, because the beetles live in the soil for 2 years as a beetle, and they actually eat a lot of the grubs, like the rose beetle grub. Firefly beetles are they're one of those parasitoid predator insects that we need. And she said, do you think that the chemical killed the firefly in the soil? And I didn't know what to say. I didn't want her to leave depressed. And I said, well, maybe not. Just ask your dad if he could stop. Tell him not to put poison on the lawn. I think it'll be the younger generation that really takes a stand and said, we're not going to do this cultural norm anymore. We're not going to go along with society's standards anymore. We don't agree with the science. The science tells us otherwise. Did I answer your question?
I'm sure I don't know where he went. I feel that you did, Marjorie. And let's see, Bruce just wrote absolutely fascinating talk. Thank you.
I was muted. I just wanted to quickly ask.
Yeah.
In that part of the lawn, it's that is going to be left as lawn. If you use animal fertilizer, is that less toxic than some of the chemicals that are put on lawns?
I don't know about animal fertilizer. That is something that I cannot honestly tell you I know anything about. Where would you acquire that?
I thought, but I guess I'm wrong, from like Home Depot or Lowe's, that some of them would have a natural fertilizer like that, but maybe not.
Oh, I don't think it's, well, I don't know if it's animal fertilizer. It could be compost from vegetable matter. I can't imagine it would be animal, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to send a PDF file to Judy, and it's just a comprehensive list of what you should ask your lawn care provider, or things that you should think about these products that you might buy readily available in a store. It's just a 2-page list. I'm going to send that to Judy, and I think that might be helpful. Judy, would you mind spreading that info?
That would be great. Unfortunately, I think I have to call the JETI talk, so allow people to go on to services if they are able to.
I understand, and I'm sorry about the delay in the beginning.
Stuff happens. We understand. But thank you so much for educating us and doing all the work that you do and being so passionate about it.
Well, thank you for having us. And if you have any more questions, or anyone in the audience, they are free. Give them my email, Judy.
Will do.
And I can pass directly on to them if they want. That's what we're here for.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And hopefully you'll be able to go to services that have probably just started. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.